Tonight, we delve into one of the most enigmatic visions ever recorded. A vision so strange, so surreal, that it has baffled scholars, theologians, and conspiracy theorists for centuries. Ezekiel's wheel. Was it a divine revelation, or an encounter with something far beyond human understanding? In 624 BCE, a prophet named Ezekiel saw a chariot made of wheels within wheels, glowing with fire, and surrounded by 4 creatures with multiple faces. But what if Ezekiel wasn't describing a vision of God's glory? What if he was witnessing something entirely different, an advanced craft, a celestial encounter, or perhaps the first recorded UFO sighting in history? For thousands of years, this vision has sparked debates, from ancient mystics to modern-day engineers. Some call it the perfect description of divine power, while others see it as a window into a forgotten age of technology and extraterrestrial life. But one thing is certain: the answers lie hidden in the words of an ancient text, a text that has more than one way of being interpreted. So sit back as we explore Ezekiel's wheel and ask the question: was it the vision of God or an ancient skycraft? Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. History tells us that before visions change the world, they arrive in moments of collapse and exile, and this is where the story of Ezekiel begins. Not in a palace or a temple, but among captives far from home, where identity, faith, and memory were under pressure. Ezekiel was born into a priestly family in Judah during the final years of the kingdom, a time when Babylon was rising and Jerusalem was weakening. In the year 597, before the Common Era, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar carried away the first large group of Judeans, including young priests and craftsmen, and relocated them deep inside Mesopotamia. Ezekiel was among them. This exile was not just a political defeat, it was a spiritual shock. The temple still stood in Jerusalem, yet the people chosen to serve it were cut off from its ritual sacrifices and daily rhythms. Ezekiel lived with other deportees near a man-made waterway known as the Kibar Canal, part of Babylon's vast irrigation system. These exiles weren't chained slaves, but displaced communities forced to rebuild life under foreign rule. They spoke their own language, remembered their own stories, and struggled with one terrifying question: had their God abandoned them? Until this point, Israelite faith was deeply tied to land, city, and temple. Prophets before Ezekiel spoke within the borders of Israel. Ezekiel would become the first major prophet to speak from outside it. That fact alone makes his message different. He was not explaining why disaster might come. Disaster had already happened. Historically, we know Ezekiel began his prophetic activity around the age of 30, the traditional age for priestly service. Instead of entering the temple, he entered exile. Instead of offering sacrifices, he offered words. His book opens with careful dating, rooted in real political time, linking his visions to the reign of Babylonian kings and the years of captivity. He believed what he witnessed occurred in a real place, at a real time among real people. The world Ezekiel inhabited was saturated with images of divine beings, thrones, and cosmic order. Babylonian culture itself was filled with sky gods, winged creatures, and moving divine platforms carved into stone reliefs. Ezekiel knew this world, yet his vision wouldn't echo Babylon. It would challenge it. His message was radical for its time. He claimed that the God of Israel was not trapped in Jerusalem and not defeated by exile. That divine presence could move, appear, and act even in foreign lands. This is the ground on which Ezekiel's famous vision stands. A displaced priest, a conquered people, a question about where power truly resides. Before wheels, before fire, before creatures, there is exile. And it is from exile that one of the most mysterious visions in human history would emerge, not as fantasy, but as a response to loss fear and the search for meaning when the old world had already ended. Everything that follows begins here, at the edge of certainty and belief. The place where a vision happens matters as much as the vision itself, and, in Ezekiel's case, that place was not sacred ground, but a canal dug by an empire. The Kibar was part of Babylon's vast network of waterways, engineered to control land labor and food. It was not a natural river like the Jordan, but a man-made channel designed for order and efficiency. Along its banks lived displaced Judeans, people removed from their homeland and placed inside a system meant to absorb them. This is where Ezekiel situates his vision, deliberately anchoring it in a real location, known to both Babylonian administrators and the exiled community. Historically, the Kibar Canal is identified with waterways near the city of Nippur, a major religious and economic center in Mesopotamia. Babylon didn't scatter its captives randomly. Skilled workers, priests, and scribes were settled together so they could contribute to the empire, while remaining under control. This explains why a priest like Ezekiel could still write, teach, and address a community. The exiles gathered by the canal to work, to talk, and to remember who they had been. It became a shared space of loss, reflection, and identity. In ancient Israel, water was often associated with life order and divine blessing. Rivers marked boundaries and sacred moments. Yet, the Kibar was different. It symbolized foreign power, human control, and forced relocation. By placing the vision here, Ezekiel sends a quiet but powerful message. The God of Israel is not limited by geography. Divine presence is not confined to temples, altars, or holy cities. It can appear even beside an imperial canal carved by conquerors. The text of Ezekiel is careful to describe time and place. He notes the year of exile, though, location by the canal, and the gathered elders of the community. This detail gives weight to the experience. Ezekiel is not alone separated from reality. He is among people who can witness his reactions, hear his words, and measure his claims. This grounds the vision in social history, not private imagination. Life by the Kibar was filled with tension. The exiles lived better than slaves, but worse than citizens. They could build homes, start families, and farmland, but they remained outsiders. They were surrounded by Babylonian religion symbols and rituals that claimed power through visible gods and cosmic order. Ezekiel's vision emerges in this environment, where competing claims about authority and the divine were everywhere. By the river, the people likely discussed rumors from Jerusalem, hopes of return, and fears of permanent loss. It is into this uncertainty that Ezekiel speaks. The vision does not pull people away from their reality. It confronts it directly. If God can reveal himself here, then exile is not abandonment. It is transformation. The setting reminds listeners that revelation often begins in ordinary places shaped by power and displacement, where questions are sharper. Faith is tested, and meaning must be rebuilt from the ground up, not inherited from comfortable certainty alone. Before any creature appears, before any wheel turns, Ezekiel sees something far more familiar and far more terrifying: a storm. He describes a great wind coming from the north, a massive cloud, thick and heavy, filled with flashing fire and surrounded by brightness. For ancient audiences, this language carried immediate meaning. Storms weren't random weather events. They were symbols of divine arrival. Across the ancient Near East gods revealed themselves through wind, fire, cloud, and light. Ezekiel is using a known visual language, but he is applying it with precision and intent. In Israelite tradition, the north was often associated with danger, invasion, and judgment. Major military threats, including Assyria and Babylon, came from that direction. By stating that the storm approaches from the north, Ezekiel connects divine appearance with historical trauma. This is not a gentle vision. It arrives with force, urgency, and weight. The cloud recalls earlier moments in Israel's memory, such as the cloud on Mount Sinai, and the pillar that guided the people through the wilderness. Fire, too, was a sign of holiness, power, and separation between the human and the divine. Ezekiel would have known these images from the culture around him, yet his description is distinct. He does not name a storm god. He does not speak of thunderbolts or rain. Instead, he emphasizes motion, brilliance, and contained power. The fire flashes, but does not consume. The cloud moves with purpose, not chaos. The language Ezekiel uses is careful and layered. He repeatedly says that what he sees is like something rather than claiming direct identification. This suggests the limits of human language when facing overwhelming phenomena. Ancient prophets often struggled to describe encounters they believed came from beyond normal reality. The storm functions as a threshold moment, separating ordinary perception from revelation. This opening also serves a psychological purpose. For people living in exile, under constant uncertainty, a storm symbolizes loss of control. By placing the divine within that image, Ezekiel reframes fear itself. What seems threatening may carry meaning. What appears destructive may precede order. This does not remove fear, but gives it direction. Importantly, Ezekiel does not describe hearing a voice at first. He sees movement, light, and power before words. The vision builds gradually, allowing tension to rise. From a historical perspective, this imagery wouldn't suggest machinery or technology to its original audience. It would suggest presence, authority, and otherness. Storm language was the highest register available to describe a god who was approaching. Ezekiel is signaling that what follows is not a dream or metaphor, but an encounter that demands attention and reverence. The storm from the north marks the beginning of a vision that will challenge geography, power, and belief. It announces that something is coming that cannot be ignored, contained, or easily explained. For Ezekiel and his listeners, it meant that even in exile, even under empire, the divine was still moving, still arriving, and still capable of shaking the ground beneath human certainty forever. As the storm opens, Ezekiel's vision moves from raw power to defined form, and this is where the four living creatures appear. He does not call them angels, and he does not name them at first. He simply describes them as living beings, emerging from the fire, each moving with purpose and unity. For an ancient audience, this imagery would immediately signal something sacred. Composite creatures weren't monsters, but symbols of divine authority across the ancient Near East. Each creature stands upright, with a human-like form, yet their appearance goes beyond anything human. Fire moves among them, but it does not harm them, reinforcing the idea that they belong to a realm where normal rules do not apply. Ezekiel is careful to describe what he sees without claiming full understanding. This restraint is important because it shows that the vision is not designed to be decoded easily, but to be acknowledged. Historically, the strongest connection for these beings comes from Israel's own temple tradition. Cherubim were not cute figures, but powerful guardians placed at sacred boundaries. In the temple in Jerusalem, large cherubim stood over the Ark of the Covenant, forming a throne space for the presence of God. Ezekiel later explicitly identifies the living creatures as cherubim, confirming that his audience was meant to make this connection. What he is seeing is not random beings, but a mobile version of the temple throne. This matters deeply in the context of exile. The physical temple still stood in Jerusalem when Ezekiel first prophesied, yet the divine presence appears to him far away in Babylon. By showing cherubim outside the temple, the vision declares that sacred presence is not fixed to a building. The throne of God is not trapped behind walls. It can move, it can appear, and it can confront empire directly. The creatures move without turning, changing direction instantly, without hesitation. This motion symbolizes obedience and alignment with a higher will. There is no confusion, no struggle, and no independence among them. Everything about their movement communicates order. In a world where exile felt like chaos, this image restores a sense of cosmic structure. They would have recognized them as symbolic carriers of authority, combining aspects of humanity, strength, endurance, and transcendence. The vision draws on familiar sacred language while pushing it into a new setting. By introducing the four living creatures, Ezekiel anchors his vision in continuity with Israel's past, while also expanding it. The same guardians once seen in a fixed sanctuary now appear in open space among the exiled. This signals that the story of divine presence is not over. It is changing location, but not meaning. The appearance of the creatures marks a shift from fear to focus. The storm announces arrival, but the creatures announce order. They prepare the ground for what comes next, not by explaining it, but by stabilizing the vision around symbols that carry weight, memory, and authority for a people who feared they had lost all three still. As Ezekiel's vision sharpens, the living creatures reveal a detail that has fascinated readers for centuries. Each one bears four faces. This is not presented as horror or shock, but as meaning. To an ancient audience, faces were not decoration, they were identity. A face showed essence, role, and authority. By giving each creature multiple faces, the vision immediately steps beyond the limits of ordinary beings and into symbolic language meant to communicate scope and reach. The four faces are described as human, lion, ox, and eagle. These were not random animals chosen for drama. In the ancient world, they represented the highest forms of life in different realms. The human stood for intelligence and leadership. The lion symbolized strength and kingship among wild animals. The ox represented endurance, power, and service among domesticated animals. The eagle embodied speed, vision, and dominance of the sky. Together, they formed a complete picture of creation under order rather than chaos. In ancient Near Eastern thought, the world was often understood through directions and domains. The four directions north, south, east, and west marked completeness. To say something reached all four directions was to say it was total and unchallenged. The four faces mirror this idea. The creatures do not need to turn because they already face everywhere. This suggests awareness, control, and readiness in all directions at once. This imagery also connects to Israel's temple symbolism. Later, biblical texts and traditions associate these faces with the tribes of Israel and with the throne imagery surrounding divine presence. Ezekiel himself later revisits these creatures and confirms their identity as cherubim, reinforcing that this was not an abstract vision detached from tradition, but an expansion of it. For people in exile, surrounded by foreign gods tied to specific cities or regions, this message mattered. Babylonian deities ruled certain places, certain skies, certain lands. Ezekiel's vision quietly undermines that worldview. The God he presents is not regional. Authority is not limited to one direction, one land, or one people. The four faces declare a presence that sees and governs all creation without blind spots. The fact that each creature has the same four faces also matters. There is no hierarchy or competition among them. No single aspect dominates. Intelligent strength service and vision exist together in balance. This unity contrasts sharply with human empires built on imbalance and domination. The vision offers a different model of power, one that is complete rather than divided. Ancient audiences would not have tried to imagine how such beings physically functioned. The point was not anatomy, but meaning. The vision communicates that the divine order encompasses every domain humans recognize. Land, sky, wilderness, and civilization are all included. Nothing lies outside this scope. By presenting faces tied to the four directions, Ezekiel anchors his vision in a cosmic map familiar to his listeners while expanding their understanding of it. The exile had made their world feel small, fragile, and broken. This image restores scale. It reminds them that despite displacement, the structure of reality itself remains ordered. The faces of the four directions prepare the listener for what comes next. They establish that this vision is not about a local event or private experience. It speaks to the whole world. And in doing so, it quietly asks a dangerous question. If authority truly covers all directions, then who really controls history? The empire that conquered them, or the presence moving unseen through every corner of creation? As Ezekiel continues to describe the living creatures, he shifts attention from what they look like to how they move, and this detail carries just as much meaning. Each creature has wings, and those wings are not decorative. They are instruments of motion, sound, and connection. Ezekiel describes the wings touching one another, forming a unified structure, rather than separate individuals acting alone. To an ancient listener, this would signal coordination and shared purpose. Wings in ancient symbolic language represented transcendence and speed, but also obedience. Creatures with wings were understood to move at the will of a higher authority. Here, the wings do not flap wildly or beat the air in struggle. They operate in perfect order. When the creatures move, they move together. When they stop together. There is no hesitation and no deviation. This is not chaos dressed in power. It is discipline expressed through motion. The sound of the wings is also emphasized. Ezekiel compares it to rushing waters and overwhelming noise. In ancient texts, sound often accompanied divine presence. It marked arrival and authority. The wings produce a controlled thunder, not random noise. This reinforces the idea that power does not need disorder to be effective. It can be loud and overwhelming while still precise. Movement without turning is one of the most striking details. The creatures do not pivot or adjust their bodies. They move straight forward in any direction instantly. This would have communicated something profound to an ancient audience. It suggests complete awareness. There is no blind side, no delay, no need to reposition. Everything is already aligned. In the context of exile, this imagery carries weight. The world Ezekiel's audience knew felt unstable. Empires rose and fell, borders shifted, and lives were uprooted. Nothing felt coordinated. The synchronized movement of the creatures offers a counter-image. Beneath visible chaos, there is an unseen order moving with intention. History may appear scattered, but it is not uncontrolled. Ancient Near Eastern art often depicted divine beings in rigid symmetrical poses to communicate stability. Ezekiel's vision goes further. These beings are not frozen. They are dynamic, yet unified. This combination would have been especially powerful. It presents motion without confusion and speed without loss of control. Importantly, Ezekiel never suggests that the creatures decide where to go. Their movement is responsive. They move according to the spirit among them. This reinforces a hierarchy where power flows from a central will rather than individual ambition. In a world dominated by kings who ruled through force, this image presents a different model of authority. For later readers tempted to imagine mechanisms or machines, this section offers a corrective. The emphasis is not on how movement is achieved, but on what that movement represents. Order, alignment, and purpose are the message. The vision communicates that true power does not stumble. By focusing on wings movement and unison, Ezekiel adds another layer to his vision. The creatures are not only impressive in form, but in function. They embody a universe where every motion has meaning and every direction is guided. For a displaced people searching for signs of stability, this image would have spoken clearly. Whatever appears broken on the surface, something deeper is still moving in harmony unseen, yet unwavering. As the vision unfolds, Ezekiel introduces the element that would later spark centuries of debate, the wheels. He describes wheel-like forms appearing beside each living creature, not above them and not beneath them, but closely connected to their movement. For the original audience, this was not an invitation to speculation, but continuation of symbolic language. Wheels in the ancient world were among the most powerful symbols of movement, authority, and reach. In Ezekiel's time, wheels were not everyday objects. They were associated with chariots, thrones, and warfare. Kings traveled on wheeled platforms, and divine beings in surrounding cultures were often imagined riding celestial chariots. The wheel symbolized power that could move across land without resistance. By placing wheels beside the creatures, Ezekiel is expanding the idea of divine mobility. Presence is not fixed. It moves with intention. The text describes the wheels as having a complex appearance, often translated as a wheel within a wheel. This phrase has caused confusion for modern readers, but for ancient listeners, it suggested multi-directional movement. A structure that could roll in any direction without turning would represent total freedom of motion. Nothing could block it. Nothing could slow it. Ezekiel emphasizes that the wheels move in perfect coordination with the creatures. They do not act independently. When the creatures move, the wheels move. When the creatures stop, the wheels stop. This reinforces the theme of unity already established. The wheels are not machines operating on their own. They are part of a single living system responding to one guiding will. The appearance of the wheels also carries deep theological meaning. In Israelite thought, God was often described as enthroned above cherubim. Here the throne is implied rather than shown, and the wheels suggest that the throne itself is mobile. This is a powerful idea in exile. It declares that divine authority is not stuck in Jerusalem and not trapped in ruins. It can arrive anywhere, even beside a canal in Babylon. Ancient Near Eastern texts sometimes describe gods riding storm chariots across the heavens. Ezekiel's vision uses similar imagery, but strips it of mythic rivalry. There is no battle scene and no enemy. The wheels are not weapons. They are instruments of presence. For later readers influenced by modern technology, the wheels became the most tempting detail to reinterpret. Yet, historically, there is no evidence that Ezekiel intended a mechanical description. He does not explain materials measurements or construction. He focuses on movement, relationship, and meaning. The wheels are described as living in a sense filled with awareness and responsiveness. This detail becomes clearer when Ezekiel later states that the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. This statement would have made sense to ancient listeners. Spirit in biblical language refers to life force direction and purpose. The wheels are animated not by engines, but by will. The arrival of the wheels marks a turning point in the vision. The creatures established authority and order. The wheels establish reach. Together, they communicate a message that would have been unmistakable to the exiles. Power is not confined. Control is not lost. What governs the universe is not static. By introducing the wheels, Ezekiel pushes the boundaries of sacred imagery, while remaining rooted in his world. The vision does not belong to fantasy or invention. It belongs to a symbolic language designed to express something too large for ordinary words. The wheels do not answer questions, they deepen them, and in doing so, they prepare the listener for the unsettling possibility that divine movement may be closer and more active than anyone expected. Ezekiel's vision continues to challenge ordinary perception when he introduces the wheels not as simple mechanisms, but as entities infused with life and awareness. Later, Jewish tradition names them ophanim, meaning wheels, and treats them as celestial beings intimately connected to the divine throne. They are not decorations or tools, but participants in the presence and action of God. This idea emphasizes that movement, authority, and consciousness are inseparable in the vision. The text specifies that the spirit of the living creatures is in the wheels. This phrase indicates that the wheels operate with the same intentionality and responsiveness as the cherubim themselves. For an ancient audience, this would have communicated total integration. The wheels do not roll randomly. They obey the same divine will and share the same awareness as the creatures beside them. Movement is unified. Authority is comprehensive. Historically, celestial wheels appear in the context of throne visions. In Israelite and Near Eastern thought, divine presence is often envisioned as mobile, but always accompanied by attendants or symbolic creatures. The ophanim are part of a broader theological language describing the glory and mobility of God. They bridge the space between heaven and earth, between throne and exile. Their animation marks them as extraordinary and beyond ordinary human or animal life. The appearance of the wheels as living beings reinforces the idea that the divine is dynamic, not static. God's throne is not confined to a location or building. By extension, authority is not tied to human borders. For the exiles in Babylon, this is a critical message. Even though Jerusalem is under siege and the temple is compromised, the divine order continues. The wheels symbolize that God's movement cannot be halted by politics, armies, or walls. The text describes the wheels as full of eyes, a detail that communicates awareness, omniscience, and vigilance. Eyes in ancient symbolism denote seeing, controlling, and knowing. Each wheel sees in all directions, yet does not act independently. The vision conveys coordination. Knowledge is not random. Observation leads to deliberate action. This would have comforted a community uncertain of their safety and their future. Oponym are therefore simultaneously functional and sacred. Their movement conveys order and purpose. Their presence signifies divine approval. They carry and extend the throne without replacing or diminishing it. The wheels as beings embody the combination of speed, awareness, and obedience. They are literally extensions of divine will. Later, mystical and rabbinic traditions expand on the ophonym. They are described as living circles or wheels, within wheels continuously turning and serving the throne. These interpretations remain consistent with Ezekiel's original emphasis on unison, precision, and life force. The focus is never on mechanical design, but on spiritual significance. By presenting the wheels as beings, Ezekiel signals that divine authority cannot be reduced to static imagery or human comprehension. Presence moves, observes, and acts in ways that challenge understanding. For a people in exile, this vision asserts that even when all seems lost, movement and governance continue under a divine order that is perfect, responsive, and immediate. The ophonym remind the viewer that the cosmos itself participates in God's plan. One of the most striking details in Ezekiel's vision is the presence of eyes covering the living creatures and the wheels. This imagery is repeated with emphasis and would have been immediately significant to an ancient audience. Eyes in biblical symbolism represent knowledge, awareness, and perception. They are not mere decoration, but indicators of understanding and vigilance. To see all around is to know all around. The eyes communicate a kind of divine omniscience accessible through symbolic representation rather than human experience. The text notes that the wheels are full of eyes, and the creatures themselves bear eyes on their bodies and wings. This repetition reinforces that nothing in the vision is accidental. Every movement, every action is observed and accounted for. Awareness extends beyond the immediate field of view. It is as if the creatures and wheels themselves are conduits for divine observation and judgment. The exiles by the Kaaba would have recognized that surveillance in this context does not imply fear, but order. Historically, Israelite tradition associates eyes with understanding and moral perception. Prophets frequently describe God as seeing all deeds of the nations and all hearts of individuals. In the Mesopotamian context, deities were sometimes depicted with symbols or objects representing their awareness and reach. Ezekiel combines these ideas to make a theological point. Presence is not bound by space. Awareness penetrates boundaries. The vision is not concerned with mechanical explanation, but with the implications of constant observation. The eyes also communicate integration. The creatures and the wheels operate together, not independently. Awareness informs action, and action follows awareness. There is no separation between seeing and responding. This would have been a profound message to the exiled Judeans. Even far from Jerusalem, under foreign authority, the divine remains fully alert and responsive. Nothing is hidden, and nothing is beyond divine notice. In addition to signaling perception, the eyes carry ethical significance. To ancient, audiences seeing was tied to accountability. Divine observation meant that justice would ultimately be applied. The exiles could take comfort that their situation was neither ignored nor abandoned. The symbolic eyes emphasize that God's knowledge encompasses the totality of existence, not merely the temple or the land. Visually, the image would have been overwhelming. Wheels within wheels, creatures covered in eyes' wings, extended in unison each motion observed. The repetition of eyes creates a sense of intensity and unending perception. The audience understands that the divine cannot be surprised or misled. This contrasts with human rulers, whose vision is always limited and fallible. The theological interpretation of the eyes also ties into later rabbinic commentary. Scholars describe the Ophanim and cherubim as beings whose eyes allow them to communicate the presence of God across all creation. Seeing in every direction without turning conveys completeness and perfection. This reinforces that the divine presence is mobile aware and fully capable of engaging with the world. By emphasizing eyes all around, Ezekiel anchors his vision in a reality where perception and awareness define authority. The exiled community is reminded that although they are displaced, they remain under the gaze and guidance of a presence that observes continuously and acts deliberately. Awareness is not passive. It is power, protection, and order manifest in the very form of the vision. Above the living creatures and the wheels, Ezekiel describes a platform like crystal stretching across the vision. This expanse is not solid in the human sense, but appears clear, reflective, and awe-inspiring. For an ancient audience, crystal was associated with purity, brilliance, and the visible presence of the divine. By placing this platform above the creatures, Ezekiel establishes a separation between the earthly realm and the throne of God. It is a space of mediation, an intermediary level where the divine glory rests above living beings but remains accessible to vision. The platform serves multiple symbolic functions. First, it acts as a boundary. The creatures operate below, moving, observing, and coordinating, while above lies the domain of unapproachable authority. Second, it transmits light and radiance. Ezekiel repeatedly emphasizes brightness and splendor in the vision. The crystalline appearance signals transparency, order, and the unchanging nature of divine presence. Human perception is limited, but the platform conveys the sense that the divine operates with clarity and stability. Historically, Israelite and Near Eastern texts often depict the divine throne as elevated above attendants or symbolic creatures. Thrones are mounted on high platforms, pillars, or heavenly expanses, creating a hierarchy of presence. Ezekiel's platform-like crystal echoes this imagery while introducing a new visual. It is not a building, it is not a mountain, it is a luminous surface supporting and separating, yet connecting all elements of the vision. The imagery also conveys theological meaning for a community in exile. Babylon represents foreign order and worldly power, yet the divine throne remains untouched above. The crystal platform communicates that ultimate authority is not contingent on human location, wealth, or military strength. God's presence is elevated, ordered, and unmovable. Even when exiles are removed from the temple, the throne remains intact and radiant above the earthly scene. Ezekiel's attention to the crystalline quality emphasizes perception. Light passes, reflects, and shines through without distortion, suggesting purity and truth. Unlike human courts or earthly authority, the divine realm is fully transparent, governed by wisdom rather than ambition. The platform communicates that above the chaos of exile and human limitation, there exists order that can be seen but not fully grasped. The space also functions as a stage for subsequent visions. It separates the watchers from the watched. The creatures carry awareness and motion below, while the throne above embodies unapproachable majesty. This division frames the vision structurally and symbolically. Observers understand that the creatures act under authority, while the platform holds the divine in a form perceivable but distinct. By describing a platform like crystal, Ezekiel bridges imagination, memory, and theology. Ancient audiences familiar with temple architecture, Babylonian cosmology, and biblical language would recognize echoes of sacred space while receiving a message adapted to the context of exile. The crystalline expanse is a lens through which the movement, power, and awareness of all lower elements gain coherence. The platform communicates permanence, separation, and mediation. It tells the viewer that the throne of God is elevated, luminous, and perfectly ordered. In a world where empires fall and cities crumble, the crystal platform reassures the exiles that the ultimate order remains unshaken, visible, and commanding. It is a point of connection between the divine and the creatures below, a symbol of presence that cannot be confined to human limitations, yet is revealed to those who witness it. Above the crystal platform, Ezekiel sees a throne-like form described as sapphire blue, brilliant and radiant. In ancient Near Eastern and Israelite vision traditions, thrones symbolize authority, presence, and governance. Sapphire is associated with purity, value, and the divine realm. By placing a throne above the creatures and wheels, Ezekiel establishes a hierarchy of sacred space. The throne is the focal point, a seat of ultimate authority that commands attention and respect from all that exists below. The description of sapphire connects to both biblical and regional symbolism. In Exodus, the tablets of the covenant are said to be written on sapphire stone, linking law, covenant, and divine presence. In Mesopotamian art, gods are often depicted, enthroned on elevated platforms or pedestals with blue or lapis materials, signifying sky, water, and eternity. Ezekiel is drawing on familiar symbols to communicate a theological reality that would resonate with his audience. The throne embodies stability, authority, and accessibility in vision, while remaining untouchable in reality. For a community in exile, the sapphire throne communicates reassurance. Babylon has conquered their homeland, their temple is compromised, yet the divine authority has not diminished. The throne is elevated and luminous. Its brilliance suggests that spiritual order and cosmic governance are intact, even if earthly structures are broken. Presence and power transcend geography, reminding the exiles that God's rule continues despite displacement. The throne is not described with human furniture conventions. It is not made of wood or carved stone. It is radiant, immaterial, and symbolic. This emphasizes that divine authority is beyond human craftsmanship and worldly material. The precious imagery reinforces that what is being depicted is both extraordinary and beyond ordinary experience. The throne is not just a seat. It is a manifestation of divine majesty and power. Ezekiel also conveys that the throne is positioned directly above the creatures and wheels, connecting movement, awareness, and authority into a coherent vision. The living creatures convey motion and obedience. The wheels convey mobility and multidirectional responsiveness. The throne conveys governance, judgment, and presence. Together, they create a visual theology in which every element has purpose, hierarchy, and function. The use of color sapphire also reinforces the separation of realms. The throne is not part of the earth or the canal below. It is elevated, crystalline, luminous, and sacred. Observers understand that it exists in a different register than the creatures and wheels, yet its authority extends to them. This is a theological statement that authority, knowledge, and vision are united in divine governance. By presenting the throne of sapphire, Ezekiel follows and expands established throne vision traditions. Earlier texts describe God enthroned, surrounded by cherubim and attendants. Ezekiel adds mobility, complexity, and integration with living beings. The throne is a point of focus, clarity, and certainty in a world of exile and uncertainty. It reminds those who witness or hear the vision that divine presence remains stable, radiant, and commanding above all else. The sapphire throne communicates ultimate authority, majesty, and enduring order across creation. At the pinnacle of Ezekiel's vision, the text describes a figure with the likeness of a man seated upon the sapphire throne. This human-like form is radiant, glowing with brilliance like burnished metal or fire. For an ancient audience, this appearance would signal both familiarity and transcendence. Human likeness makes the divine relatable, yet the radiance communicates power, holiness, and separation from ordinary life. The combination of human form and dazzling brilliance emphasizes that this presence is not of the world below, but entirely other. The depiction of a human figure on the throne draws from temple and throne traditions. In Israelite culture, cherubim guard the Ark of the Covenant, and the high place signifies divine dwelling. The throne represents authority and judgment. By placing a figure resembling a man upon it, Ezekiel communicates that the God of Israel is not abstract or distant. Presence is personal, intentional, and capable of engagement with the world and the exiles in Babylon. Radiance and fire are repeated motifs in biblical theophany. Light symbolizes holiness, awareness, and the life-giving power of God. In Ezekiel's description, the glow is not merely visual. It represents authority and influence. The exiled audience would understand that what they see is both a revelation of character and a confirmation of cosmic order. The human likeness functions as a bridge between the familiar and the extraordinary. The throne, the crystal platform, the wheels, and the creatures have established movement, awareness, and hierarchy. The appearance of a human likeness focuses the vision on a central figure that governs all of these elements. This figure is not passive. Authority is active and deliberate. The human likeness embodies judgment, knowledge, and presence. It is the culmination of the vision in which mobility, observation, and order converge. Historically, visions of divine beings often include anthropomorphic elements. Mesopotamian and Canaanite traditions describe gods with human features but extraordinary traits. Ezekiel's depiction aligns with these patterns while maintaining Israelite monotheism. The figure is entirely divine, without division or competition, yet described in terms that humans can recognize. This makes the presence comprehensible without reducing its sacredness. For the exiles, the human likeness carries theological significance. Jerusalem is distant, the temple is compromised, and kings are powerless. Yet the vision shows that the God who rules from the throne is active, aware, and capable of influence anywhere. The human likeness confirms continuity, authority, and the relevance of divine law and guidance. It assures the community that displacement does not imply abandonment. The radiance also functions symbolically. It communicates moral clarity and purity. Authority is inseparable from light, awareness, and truth. The human likeness on the throne embodies the combination of personal engagement and cosmic oversight. All elements of the vision, wheels, creatures, platform, and throne coalesce around this figure, creating a unified theological statement. By ending the vision with a human-like form, Ezekiel communicates that divine presence is active, relational, and intentional. It is the ultimate expression of authority and holiness. For those who witness or hear the vision, it is a reminder that even in exile, even under empire, the God of Israel is present, radiant and governing, establishing order, oversight, and hope across the universe and within the lives of the exiled community. Ezekiel's vision has often been misinterpreted as a technical blueprint or diagram, yet traditional scholarship emphasizes its symbolic nature. The creatures, the wheels, the platform, and the throne are not meant to be mapped or reconstructed physically. They communicate concepts of authority, mobility, awareness, and divine presence through imagery that would resonate with the ancient audience. To interpret the vision literally is to miss the theological message embedded in each element. The glory of God in Ezekiel is a concept, not a mechanical plan. Biblical and Near Eastern throne visions consistently use symbolic language to convey power, holiness, and governance. In the Exodus account, the cloud and fire signify divine presence without implying mechanical structure. Similarly, the Ophanim, the four living creatures, and the radiant human likeness are visual metaphors designed to communicate ideas beyond ordinary experience. Ancient viewers understood that these visions were meant to express divine truth, not physical reality. The text repeatedly emphasizes likeness and comparison, signaling that Ezekiel is aware of the limitations of human language. Phrases like a wheel within a wheel, and the appearance of a man indicate analogy rather than literal description. This restraint communicates the transcendence of the divine. The vision cannot be captured in ordinary measurements, materials, or engineering. It exists to inspire understanding, awe, and recognition of authority rather than to inform construction. Symbolism in the vision conveys mobility and omniscience. The wheels respond to the creatures and the spirit rather than operating independently. The many eyes suggest perception that surpasses human limits. Wings, synchronized movement, and radiant appearance communicate obedience, integration, and holiness. Each feature communicates relational and functional meaning, pointing to divine oversight and cosmic order. Scholars agree that the focus is theological rather than technological. Historically, ancient Near Eastern audiences were accustomed to interpreting symbolic visions. Mesopotamian gods appeared in chariots, thrones, or astral imagery to convey presence and influence. Ezekiel adapts and transforms this language for Israelite monotheism, emphasizing that the divine governs all creation, even in exile. He communicates continuity with temple and covenant traditions while expanding the scope of sacred authority beyond a fixed sanctuary. The distinction between diagram and symbolic vision matters for interpretation. Attempting to reconstruct physical wheels, engines, or machines imposes modern assumptions onto ancient texts. The intention is not to describe technology, but to illustrate omnipresence, justice, and holiness. The vision is relational. It demonstrates how divine authority interacts with the world, the exiles, and human history. By focusing on symbolic meaning, the vision remains flexible and spiritually meaningful across generations. Readers and listeners understand that the glory is revealed through presence, perception, and movement, rather than technical design. Every motion, alignment, and appearance communicates principles of power, knowledge, and continuity. The creatures, wheels, throne, and likeness of a man serve as theological instruments to convey divine governance. Ezekiel's vision challenges observers to think beyond ordinary perception. Glory is not a blueprint. It is an experience, a statement of divine order and authority. To read it literally is to obscure its message. The vision invites reflection on holiness, oversight, and purpose, teaching that even in exile and uncertainty, the divine operates through a network of presence and awareness that cannot be reduced to diagrams or engineering. Ezekiel's extensive and detailed descriptions are deliberate and shaped by context, audience, and purpose. Living among Judean exiles in Babylon around 624 BCE, Ezekiel addresses people who have lost their homeland, temple, and social structure. His audience cannot see Jerusalem or the Ark of the Covenant. They live in a foreign land, under foreign rulers. By providing meticulous imagery, he makes the invisible visible, the distant tangible, and the divine present in a way they can comprehend. Every detail carries theological significance, moral instruction, and reassurance. The prophet's use of complex imagery responds to the cultural expectations of his time. Ancient Near Eastern audiences were accustomed to symbolic and elaborate depictions of gods. Chariots, composite creatures, wheels, and thrones conveyed authority, mobility, and cosmic order. Ezekiel borrows and transforms this visual language for an Israelite monotheistic framework. The creatures, wheels, crystal platform, and sapphire throne all serve to communicate divine presence, control, and interaction with human affairs. Detail communicates credibility and seriousness, signaling that this is a revelation requiring attention and reflection. Ezekiel also writes to convey permanence and transcendence. Exiles could not rely on earthly authority or institutions for stability. By describing multiple layers, wheels within wheels, eyes covering creatures, and radiant forms, he emphasizes that divine governance is comprehensive, alert, and unstoppable. The minutiae reassure the community that God's presence and authority extend across space and time. Every observation, motion, and element is purposeful, indicating order where the exiles perceive chaos. The level of detail also supports memory and oral transmission. In a community dispersed from their homeland, visions function as mnemonic devices. Detailed imagery aids recall, discussion, and teaching. Listeners and readers can picture the creatures, wheels, platform, and throne. They can imagine the radiance and movement. This makes theological and ethical principles more immediate and accessible, strengthening communal identity and faith in circumstances of displacement. Ezekiel's vividness reinforces moral and spiritual lessons. The creature's obedience, the wheel's responsiveness, and the throne's majesty illustrate order, vigilance, and holiness. Human observers learn about responsibility, accountability, and alignment with divine will. The abundant detail ensures that these lessons are inseparable from the vision itself. The audience does not merely hear about God's authority. They perceive it visually, symbolically, and comprehensively. Historically, prophets used detailed visions to communicate authority and credibility. Precise imagery signaled authenticity and distinguished genuine prophecy from rumor or imagination. By embedding cultural and theological references in his descriptions, Ezekiel situates his message within a framework his audience recognizes. The prophet's attention to structure, motion, color, and radiance is deliberate, designed to make abstract divine concepts concrete and relational. Ultimately, Ezekiel describes so much to bridge exile and revelation, human limitation and divine presence, fear and reassurance. His attention to detail ensures that the vision is comprehensible, memorable, and instructive. The creatures, wheels, and throne are not ends in themselves, but instruments for teaching about order, authority, and hope. In a world of displacement, uncertainty, and loss, every word and image strengthens the exile's understanding that God remains present, active, and fully sovereign across all creation. Ezekiel's vision of the living creatures, wheels, and sapphire throne had a lasting impact, shaping later mystical traditions focused on the divine chariot. By the 1st centuries BCE and CE, Jewish thinkers began to interpret these images in ways that extended beyond the immediate context of exile. The vision became a foundation for Hekkalot and Merkaba literature, mystical texts that describe ascent to heavenly palaces and encounters with God's throne. The imagery provided a symbolic framework for understanding the mobility, awareness, and authority of the divine. The detailed description of wheels within wheels, creatures with multiple faces and eyes all around, informed the conception of the Merkaba, literally the chariot of God. Mystics and rabbis emphasized that the vision was not a mechanical design, but a representation of divine omnipresence and omniscience. The creature's obedience and the wheel's responsiveness were interpreted as models for spiritual ascent and for understanding how the human soul might approach divine order. Sapphire, crystal platforms, and radiant human likenesses were incorporated into mystical commentary to convey transcendence and purity. Each element became symbolic language that could be meditated upon. For example, the crystal platform represented separation from worldly distractions while maintaining connection to divine reality. The human likeness on the throne exemplified both accessibility and ultimate authority. These symbols guided practitioners in envisioning the structure of heavenly realms. Historical analysis shows that these mystical traditions arose within a context of post-exilic Judaism, influenced by Babylonian, Persian, and Hellenistic thought. Temple imagery, chariot motifs, and composite creatures appear across Mesopotamian and Persian art. Jewish interpreters adapted these motifs to reinforce monotheism and ethical instruction. The vision of Ezekiel offered a framework that was both visually striking and theologically rich, allowing for integration of foreign motifs into distinctly Israelite thought. The Merkaba mystics treated the vision as a map of divine mechanics and spiritual hierarchy rather than a literal vehicle. The focus was on the order, vigilance, and authority conveyed by each element. The creature's synchronized movement and multidirectional awareness, the wheels full of eyes, and the throne's elevated position all became tools for teaching about obedience, vigilance, and moral alignment. Each feature communicated a layer of meaning beyond physical appearance. Later, rabbinic commentary often emphasized that Ezekiel's vision was a revelation meant for those capable of understanding divine majesty and cosmic order. Mystical traditions drew on the visual vocabulary to structure meditation, ethical reflection, and understanding of the afterlife. The vision of the divine chariot informed ideas about God's interaction with the world, the possibility of ascending through spiritual planes, and the coherence of cosmic governance. By tracing the development from vision to tradition, it becomes clear that Ezekiel's imagery was transformative. It provided a model for conceptualizing divine authority, presence, and mobility. It influenced Jewish mystical thought for centuries, linking scriptural observation with meditation, ethics, and theological reflection. The vision's impact shows how detailed symbolic description can extend far beyond its original historical context, shaping religious imagination and spiritual practice in enduring ways. As Ezekiel's vision became central to Jewish mystical thought, rabbinic authorities introduced interpretive boundaries to prevent misunderstanding or misuse. The complexity and vividness of the chariot, wheels, and living creatures could easily lead to literal readings or imaginative speculation that conflicted with monotheism and ethical teaching. From the first centuries, CE onward, rabbis emphasized that the vision was symbolic, theological, and morally instructive, not a physical blueprint or mechanical design. These guardrails shaped how later generations engaged with the Merkabah and other mystical literature. The rabbis stressed that only individuals with proper knowledge, discipline, and reverence could approach the vision in study or meditation. Mishnah and Talmudic commentary includes warnings against interpreting the chariot's details without guidance, highlighting potential spiritual danger. Misreading the vision could lead to arrogance, idolatry, or confusion about God's unity and authority. The elaborate imagery of wheels within wheels, radiant human likeness, and multi-faced creatures required careful explanation to avoid misrepresentation. Historical context clarifies these measures. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 68 CE, Jewish communities were dispersed under Roman authority. Temple rituals and priestly instruction were no longer universally accessible. Mystical and scriptural study became a substitute for physical temple experience. Rabbinic oversight ensured that powerful symbolic visions like Ezekiel's did not mislead believers or encourage speculative practices that might be considered heretical or unsafe. Guardrails also included linguistic and conceptual limits. Terms like ophanim and cherubim were interpreted with emphasis on function, obedience, and divine authority rather than literal anatomy. Discussions of movement, eyes, and radiant appearance were framed in moral and spiritual terms. The chariot became a symbol for cosmic order, vigilance, and ethical alignment, guiding readers to internalize principles of justice and holiness, rather than focusing on physical construction or visual recreation. By the early medieval period, mystical texts reiterated these boundaries. Hecalot and Merkava literature often included layers of instruction, clarifying who could study the vision and under what conditions. Initiates were guided to meditate on the vision as a pathway to understanding divine oversight, human responsibility, and spiritual ascent. The rules prevented casual or disrespectful engagement and reinforced communal control over sacred knowledge. The symbolic guardrails also preserved coherence with Israelite monotheism. Ezekiel's imagery could suggest multiple agents or autonomous entities if read literally. Rabbinic interpretation emphasized that the creatures, wheels, and throne are extensions of one divine will. Every feature communicates authority, mobility, and awareness, yet all operate in perfect unity. This focus maintained doctrinal clarity while allowing for imaginative engagement. Ultimately, the guardrails demonstrate the prudence of the rabbis in preserving the vision's transformative power while preventing distortion. Ezekiel's chariot is too complex, too vivid, and too influential to be left without interpretive boundaries. By emphasizing symbolic, ethical, and theological meaning over literal description, the rabbis ensured that the vision continued to inspire wonder, reflection, and moral insight across generations. These measures allowed Ezekiel's imagery to endure without creating confusion or misapplication. Later in Ezekiel's account, the living creatures are explicitly identified as cherubim, linking them directly to temple imagery and established Israelite symbolism. Cherubim are first mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as guardians of sacred spaces, most notably above the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies. By associating the creatures with cherubim, Ezekiel situates his vision within a recognizable religious framework. The exiles in Babylon would have understood that these beings are not arbitrary, but represent divine presence, protection, and authority. The identification reinforces continuity with the temple traditions. In the first temple, constructed under Solomon in the 10th century BCE, cherubim were crafted as part of the inner sanctuary, their wings extended to cover sacred space and their form symbolizing divine majesty. Ezekiel, writing in 624 BCE, recalls these motifs to convey that God's throne and glory are not confined to Jerusalem. Even in exile, the cherubim indicate that divine authority remains present and active. Historically, cherubim are depicted in Israelite art and literature as composite creatures, often combining human and animal traits to express power, vigilance, and mobility. Ezekiel's 4 living creatures with multiple faces, wings, and eyes correspond to these characteristics. They embody attributes of observation, responsiveness, and service to the divine throne. The creatures act not independently, but under the guidance of God's Spirit, reflecting a theologically coherent hierarchy that mirrors the arrangement of the temple sanctuary. The identification also clarifies the function of the creatures within the vision. Their movement, eyes, and synchronized wings are not random. Each feature conveys vigilance, divine authority, and cosmic order. By naming them cherubim, Ezekiel underscores that they are sacred agents. Their proximity to the wheels, the crystal platform, and the throne signifies that temple symbolism extends into a cosmic vision. The divine presence is not static. It moves with intention and awareness. For the exiled community, this link to cherubim carries reassurance and moral significance. Even though the temple is destroyed or inaccessible, the cherubim demonstrate that God's governance and protection continue. They symbolize continuity between the worship of the temple and the divine order in exile. The creature's vigilance reflects God's ongoing oversight of Israel, reinforcing faith, hope, and obedience. Later Jewish tradition and mystical interpretation also emphasize this identification. Hecalot and Merkaba literature treat cherubim as integral to the heavenly chariot, connecting the vision to spiritual ascent, divine observation, and ethical responsibility. Cherubim serve as intermediaries between God and creation, translating movement and awareness into relational and moral significance. This reinforces the symbolic, theological, and ethical dimensions of Ezekiel's vision. By confirming the creatures as cherubim, Ezekiel anchors the vision in historical, religious, and symbolic reality. The imagery is not invented, but draws upon known temple motifs, emphasizing divine authority, presence, and order. It communicates that even in exile, God's power is visible, mobile, and structured, providing both reassurance and instruction to a displaced people. The cherubim serve as a bridge between sacred tradition and visionary experience, connecting history, theology, and cosmic order. In the 20th century, readers began to reinterpret Ezekiel's vision through the lens of modern technology and scientific curiosity. The vivid description of wheels within wheels, creatures with multiple faces, eyes all around, and radiant human likenesses prompted speculation about spacecraft, advanced machinery, or even extraterrestrial observation. This perspective emerged at a time when aviation, space exploration, and rapid technological advancement made mechanical and aerial possibilities familiar to the general public. Scholars and enthusiasts began asking questions about whether Ezekiel's imagery could reflect experiences of phenomena not understood in his historical context. These interpretations often focus on movement, precision, and multi-directional capability. The wheels that move in perfect coordination with the creatures, the responsiveness to spirit, and the radiant energy of the throne have been compared to descriptions of vehicles capable of rapid and versatile navigation. Observers note that the ancient audience would have lacked conceptual frameworks for engines, propulsion, or electricity. Yet the vision emphasizes mobility, awareness, and coordination that resonate with technological thinking. Modern readers apply their contemporary knowledge to reinterpret the symbolic imagery in these terms. The speculation is not limited to the wheels. The human likeness upon the throne, radiant and commanding, is sometimes seen as a form of intelligent control or pilot, guiding a complex system. The eyes covering creatures and wheels are interpreted as sensors or surveillance mechanisms. These readings do not diminish the vision's theological meaning, but rather highlight how human understanding changes when new tools and experiences are available. Technology offers a new vocabulary for describing qualities that ancient symbolism conveyed metaphorically. Historical analysis reminds us that Ezekiel wrote in 624 BCE within the Babylonian exile, drawing on Near Eastern throne visions, temple imagery, and Israelite theology. The creatures, wheels, platform, and throne are deeply rooted in symbolic and cultural frameworks designed to communicate divine authority, mobility, and awareness. Modern interpretations do not replace these origins, but reflect contemporary fascination with the unknown, mechanical, and cosmic. They reveal as much about 20th century perspectives as they do about the text itself. The trend also reflects wider interest in unexplained phenomena, ufology, and the search for connections between ancient texts and advanced technology. Television, books, and popular culture contributed to reimagining Ezekiel's vision through a technological lens. The vision's specificity, detail, and seeming strangeness make it a natural subject for such reinterpretation, even when scholarly consensus maintains that the imagery functions symbolically rather than mechanically. By examining the vision through modern eyes, readers confront questions about perception, interpretation, and the limits of historical understanding. Technology allows new metaphors for coordination, intelligence, and movement, but the core of Ezekiel's message remains theological and ethical. The creatures, wheels, and throne still communicate authority, vigilance, and divine presence, even when interpreted as machinery or aerial vehicles. Modern questions demonstrate how enduring and compelling the vision is, inviting continuous engagement, reflection, and imaginative exploration across centuries. By the mid-20th century, popular culture began to reinterpret Ezekiel's vision as a potential encounter with advanced craft or unidentified flying objects. Influenced by the rise of science fiction, increasing reports of UFO sightings, and fascination with space exploration, writers and enthusiasts suggested that the wheels within wheels, the radiant human likeness, and the eyes all around could describe a technological phenomenon rather than purely symbolic or theological imagery. This perspective reframes the vision through a modern lens, linking ancient descriptions to contemporary concepts of aerial vehicles and intelligent control systems. The wheel's multi-directional movement, coordination with living creatures, and capacity to rise or hover inspired comparisons with aircraft or spacecraft. Observers noted that Ezekiel's account includes details that seem remarkably precise. The wheels move in unison. They respond to the spirit rather than independently, and the creatures appear aware of their surroundings. Modern readings interpret these features as analogous to controlled flight, guidance systems, and sensors. Popular interpretations emphasize the idea of an intelligent operator, corresponding to the human likeness on the throne, guiding the entire mechanism with authority and precision. Historical context shows that Ezekiel wrote in 624 BCE among Judean exiles in Babylon, drawing on Israelite temple imagery and Near Eastern throne visions. The creatures, wheels, and radiant throne served symbolic purposes. They conveyed divine presence, cosmic authority, and moral oversight. The vision was intended to communicate theological truths, not mechanical design. However, contemporary audiences, influenced by technology and modern aerial phenomena, applied a new, interpretive framework that transformed the symbolic into the speculative. The emergence of the UFO reading coincided with cultural fascination with extraterrestrial life. Literature, television, and cinema in the 20th century popularized ideas of advanced beings visiting Earth in flying machines. Ezekiel's detailed vision became a focal point for comparisons, with wheels within wheels interpreted as engines or propulsion systems, and eyes as observation or sensory equipment. This reframing does not negate historical symbolism, but demonstrates how cultural context influences interpretation of ancient texts. Skeptical scholarship maintains that Ezekiel's imagery is symbolic, grounded in visual and theological traditions rather than technology. The text repeatedly emphasizes likeness, radiance, and divine glory, elements that would resonate with the exiled community familiar with temple rituals and Near Eastern throne visions. The UFO interpretation reflects modern imagination and fascination rather than historical intent. Yet, it illustrates the enduring intrigue of the vision and its capacity to inspire reinterpretation across eras. By viewing Ezekiel through the lens of advanced craft, popular culture raises questions about perception, symbolism, and human understanding of extraordinary phenomena. The vision continues to provoke reflection, whether read as theological narrative, mystical experience, or imaginative speculation. The UFO reading highlights the adaptability of Ezekiel's imagery and its ability to speak to audiences across time, showing that wheels, creatures, and radiant figures can serve as symbols of divine authority, while also inviting modern questions about the unknown and the unexplained. In the late 20th century, Joseph Blumrich, an aerospace engineer with experience at NASA, approached Ezekiel's vision through the lens of mechanical and engineering logic. Blumrich studied the description of wheels within wheels, the coordinated movement of the living creatures, and the radiant human likeness on the throne, interpreting them as components of a technologically advanced aerial vehicle. He hypothesized that the detailed observations in the text could reflect practical design features rather than purely symbolic imagery. The wheel's multi-directional mobility, the creature's synchronized motion, and the emphasis on vision and awareness were analyzed as if describing guidance, propulsion, and observation systems. Blumrich applied engineering principles to features like the intersecting wheels, concluding that their structure suggested a form of omnidirectional movement consistent with modern understanding of gyroscopic or rotating mechanisms. The eyes covering the wheels and creatures were seen as surveillance instruments, allowing complete awareness of surroundings. The radiant human likeness was interpreted as a control unit or operator, responsible for guiding the entire system with precision and intent. Blumrich presented these interpretations in his writings and lectures, bridging biblical description with aerospace reasoning. Historical context remains important. Ezekiel wrote in 624 BCE among Judean exiles in Babylon, utilizing imagery drawn from Israelite temple traditions, Near Eastern throne visions, and prophetic symbolism. The creatures, wheels, and throne were intended to communicate divine authority, vigilance, and cosmic order, not to serve as technical manuals. Blumrich's analysis represents a 20th century engineering perspective applied retroactively to a highly symbolic and theological text. It illustrates how contemporary knowledge and technology can reshape interpretation of ancient visions. Blumrich's work became particularly influential in discussions about the intersection of scripture, technology, and unexplained phenomena. By examining dimensions, motion, and structure in Ezekiel's account, he suggested that the vision could be understood as a detailed observation of something that appears mechanical to modern readers. This approach received both intrigue and criticism. Scholars argued that while the mechanical reading is imaginative, it does not replace the historical and symbolic meaning of the vision, which was designed to convey theological truths to the exiles. The engineering lens also highlights human fascination with order, movement, and control. The meticulous description of the wheels, the synchronization with living creatures, and the interaction with the throne create a sense of system and purpose. Blumrich's interpretation extrapolates this system into technological terms, imagining functions like navigation, stability, and omnidirectional awareness. It demonstrates how readers apply contemporary frameworks to ancient texts, merging imagination with analysis. Ultimately, Blumrich's work reflects the enduring power of Ezekiel's vision to inspire reinterpretation. The same passages that conveyed vigilance, authority, and holiness in 624 BCE are re-examined through aerospace reasoning in the 20th century. The study emphasizes that ancient descriptions can resonate across time, inviting both symbolic and technical inquiry. Ezekiel's wheels, creatures, and radiant figure continue to provoke questions about observation, control, and the limits of human understanding. A careful reading of Ezekiel's text reveals what the prophet actually describes, separating original imagery from later speculation and interpretation. In 624 BCE, Ezekiel records a vision while living among Judean exiles in Babylon, using language and symbolism familiar to his audience. The text describes 4 living creatures, each with 4 faces and 4 wings, wheels beside them that move in perfect coordination, a platform resembling crystal, and a throne upon which sits a figure with the likeness of a man, radiant and awe-inspiring. These descriptions emphasize motion, observation, and authority, rather than mechanical function or extraterrestrial origin. The text repeatedly uses terms like and appearance, signaling that Ezekiel is conveying a likeness or vision, not a literal machine or vehicle. Phrases such as wheel within a wheel and the appearance of fire illustrate metaphorical language intended to communicate multidimensionality, brilliance, and divine complexity. The emphasis is theological and symbolic. The creatures represent vigilance, the wheels mobility and responsiveness, and the radiant figure authority and presence. The text communicates cosmic order, divine oversight, and the relationship between God and creation. Historical and cultural context further clarifies the vision. Ezekiel draws upon temple imagery, Near Eastern throne visions, and Israelite prophetic traditions. Cherubim in the first temple were symbolic guardians of sacred space. The crystal platform and sapphire throne echo motifs of purity and divine majesty. For the exiled audience in Babylon, these images reinforced continuity of divine authority, offering reassurance and guidance. The text is structured to be memorable, vivid, and ethically instructive, rather than technically precise or scientific. Later reinterpretations, including those in mystical Merkabah literature, 20th century UFO readings, and aerospace engineering speculation, often project contemporary ideas onto Ezekiel's descriptions. While these interpretations highlight creativity and imagination, they extend beyond the original intent of the text. A close reading shows that the features described, eyes, wings, faces, wheels, and radiant likeness, serve to convey spiritual truths about vigilance, divine authority, and cosmic governance. The text also emphasizes relational dynamics. The wheels move with the creatures and respond to the spirit. The creatures' faces observe in multiple directions, and the radiant figure presides over all. These details communicate interdependence, order, and unity under divine will. The narrative frames the vision as both a revelation and a teaching tool for the exiles, ensuring that its lessons about presence, oversight, and holiness are conveyed clearly and memorably. Separating original description from later speculation allows for appreciation of Ezekiel's artistry and theological intent. The vision is a structured and meaningful portrayal of God's authority and interaction with the world. It communicates principles of observation, moral responsibility, and cosmic order through vivid imagery without requiring technological or literal reinterpretation. By focusing on what the text actually says, readers can understand its original purpose, context, and enduring significance for both ancient and modern audiences. Interpretations of Ezekiel's vision have long diverged between symbolic theological readings and technological or mechanical speculation. In 624 BCE, Ezekiel records his vision among Judean exiles in Babylon, employing imagery designed to convey divine authority, vigilance, and cosmic order. The four living creatures with multiple faces and wings, the wheels within, wheels full of eyes, and the radiant figure upon the sapphire throne all function as symbolic elements rather than physical objects. Their primary purpose is to communicate God's presence, oversight, and ethical instruction to an audience separated from their homeland and temple. Theological interpretations emphasize that the creatures and wheels operate under divine command, moving with the Spirit and embodying aspects of holiness, obedience, and awareness. Cherubim, temple imagery, and radiant platforms situate the vision within Israelite tradition, reminding exiles of God's continued governance and relational presence. The imagery conveys moral and spiritual lessons through structured visual metaphors, guiding the audience to understand divine order and the relationship between God and creation. Technological readings, which became prominent in the 20th century, project modern concepts such as spacecraft, machinery, or intelligent control systems onto the vision. Observers note the precise movement of wheels, multi-directional awareness, and radiant energy, interpreting these as potential engines, sensors, and guidance systems. Aerospace engineers and UFO enthusiasts, including those influenced by technological advancement and space exploration, suggest that Ezekiel may have observed an advanced vehicle or aerial phenomenon. These interpretations extend beyond the text's original intent, reflecting contemporary curiosity rather than historical evidence. The divergence highlights the importance of context. Ancient Near Eastern throne visions and Israelite prophetic literature frequently employ symbolic and composite imagery. Readers in 624 BCE would interpret multi-faced creatures, wheels, and radiant thrones through religious, ethical, and cultural frameworks, not through technological analogies. The symbolic reading preserves theological coherence, emphasizing divine mobility, omniscience, and authority, rather than mechanical function or extraterrestrial origin. Symbol and object also function differently in narrative and cognitive terms. Symbols communicate principles that transcend the literal, while objects imply measurable, replicable entities. In Ezekiel, the vision uses every element, faces, eyes, wings, wheels, and radiance, to express relational, ethical, and cosmic realities. Understanding the difference allows modern readers to appreciate how ancient audiences comprehended extraordinary experiences without imposing anachronistic frameworks. Historical and scholarly consensus maintains that the vision is theological and symbolic. Yet, the technological lens demonstrates the enduring fascination of Ezekiel's imagery. The wheels, creatures, and throne continue to inspire speculation, but careful attention to context, literary devices, and Israelite religious practice clarifies the distinction between symbol and object. Recognizing this distinction allows the text to retain its original meaning, while acknowledging the imaginative interpretations that modern culture projects onto it. By examining symbol versus object, readers can appreciate both the depth of Ezekiel's theological vision and the reasons why later cultures reimagine it. The vision remains a testament to divine authority, vigilance, and cosmic order, communicated through structured, symbolic imagery that informs spiritual reflection rather than mechanical reconstruction. The distinction is essential for understanding historical intent and maintaining fidelity to the text's original message. Historical methods allow scholars to analyze Ezekiel's vision while acknowledging the limits of certainty regarding its details. Ezekiel wrote in 624 BCE among Judean exiles in Babylon, and the text must be understood within its historical, cultural, and religious context. Archaeology, comparative literature, and ancient Near Eastern studies can provide information about Babylonian society, Israelite temple practices, and symbolic imagery of divine authority. But they cannot verify supernatural phenomena or the literal existence of the wheels, creatures, or radiant throne. Historical evidence can explain context, audience, and symbolism, but cannot prove the spiritual or visionary experience itself. Textual analysis demonstrates that Ezekiel drew on temple motifs, Near Eastern throne visions, and prophetic tradition to communicate divine authority, vigilance, and cosmic order. Cherubim above the Ark of the Covenant, wings, crystal platforms, and sapphire imagery reflect established Israelite religious concepts familiar to the exiles. Historical methods can trace these symbols and confirm their presence in art, architecture, and literature of the period. Scholars can establish that the vision is consistent with known symbolic conventions, that it reflects exile experience, and that it communicates moral and theological lessons intended for a displaced community. Comparative study also shows how ancient cultures represented divine presence, through composite creatures, chariots, and radiance. Babylonian, Assyrian, and Persian art frequently depicts gods in motion, surrounded by attendants or wheels, which supports understanding Ezekiel's imagery as a culturally embedded symbolic representation rather than a mechanical or technological description. Historical methods can clarify influences, parallels, and interpretive frameworks that shaped Ezekiel's account. Limitations arise when addressing the visionary or miraculous aspects of the text. Historical analysis cannot confirm whether Ezekiel experienced a literal supernatural event, or whether the vision was a prophetic or mystical experience. Similarly, modern interpretations involving spacecraft or advanced technology cannot be substantiated by historical evidence, because these readings project contemporary knowledge onto a text produced in a very different cultural and temporal context. Scholars must differentiate between contextually supported claims and speculative readings. Historians can, however, identify the social, religious, and political function of the vision. It reassures exiles of God's continued authority, provides ethical instruction, and preserves Israelite identity in Babylon. The text's detailed imagery serves mnemonic, didactic, and theological purposes. Historical methods can prove these functions and show how Ezekiel's vision influenced later Jewish mystical traditions and symbolic interpretations. In conclusion, history can explain context, audience, literary conventions, and symbolic meaning, but it cannot provide empirical evidence for the visionary or supernatural content. The wheels, creatures, and radiant throne remain theological and symbolic phenomena. Recognizing what history can and cannot prove allows a balanced understanding of Ezekiel's vision, appreciating its cultural, moral, and religious significance without conflating symbolism with empirical fact. Historical methods define the boundaries of certainty while preserving the richness and enduring impact of the vision for both ancient and modern audiences. Ezekiel's vision of the wheel serves as a mirror, reflecting how each era interprets and projects its worldview onto ancient texts. In 624 BCE, Ezekiel recorded his vision among Judean exiles in Babylon, using imagery rooted in temple symbolism, Near Eastern throne visions, and Israelite prophetic tradition. The four living creatures with multiple faces, the wheels within wheels full of eyes, the crystal platform, and the radiant human likeness on the sapphire throne were designed to communicate divine authority, vigilance, and cosmic order to a displaced audience. The vision conveys theological and moral truths, not technical schematics or literal machinery. Over centuries, different generations have read the vision through their own lenses. Medieval Jewish mystics emphasized the Merkaba, interpreting the creatures, wheels, and throne as symbolic guides for spiritual ascent and divine encounter. They saw the vision as a map of cosmic order and ethical responsibility, teaching the faithful about obedience, vigilance, and the structure of heaven. In the 19th and 20th centuries, popular culture, technological imagination, and aerospace speculation projected contemporary ideas of flight, machinery, and extraterrestrial intelligence onto the text, producing readings of UFOs and advanced craft. Each interpretation reflects the interests, knowledge, and worldview of the readers, showing how vivid imagery can be continually reimagined. Historical and textual analysis clarifies what the text actually says and what it intends. Ezekiel's vision draws on Israelite and Near Eastern symbolism, temple motifs, and prophetic literary techniques. The creatures, wheels, eyes, and radiant throne serve to communicate presence, authority, and order, reassuring exiles of God's continued governance. Archaeology, comparative literature, and ancient Near Eastern studies confirm the context and symbolism, while demonstrating that technological or mechanical interpretations are projections rather than historical facts. The vision's power lies in its flexibility, its ability to speak across time while remaining grounded in its original culture. The mirror effect illustrates the dynamic relationship between text and reader. Each generation imposes questions, concerns, and frameworks onto Ezekiel's words, whether ethical, spiritual, technological, or imaginative. Modern fascination with wheels, movement, and radiant figures demonstrates human curiosity about the unknown. Yet, historical scholarship ensures that interpretation remains anchored in evidence and cultural context. The vision continues to inspire reflection on authority, observation, and cosmic order, while inviting imaginative engagement. In conclusion, Ezekiel's wheel reveals how ancient texts endure, by engaging successive audiences in dialogue with their own worldview. The vision communicates core theological and ethical messages about divine presence and cosmic order, while allowing room for interpretation, reflection, and inquiry. Each era's projection onto the vision shows human desire to understand extraordinary experiences and integrate them into contemporary frameworks. Ezekiel's wheel is both a window into 624 BCE and a mirror reflecting the values, questions, and imagination of those who read it across millennia. Its enduring relevance demonstrates the power of symbolic imagery to convey meaning, inspire inquiry, and connect human understanding across time.